In the 1990s, Shalom Harlow was everywhere. Vogue covers, major awards, MTV's House of Style. She was the woman designers called when they wanted their runway shows to become something more than fashion, when they wanted art. Then she stepped away. For years, one of the most recognizable faces in fashion faded from view. Fewer runways, no constant headlines, no neat explanation. Fashion moved on. A new generation rose, and Shalom Harlow became a question people asked out loud. What happened to her? The answer points to a health crisis she kept private, an illness that derailed her life, and a home environment she later said made her sicker. Recovery wasn't a comeback arc. It was uncertain, slow, and personal. But this isn't a tragedy. It's the story of a performer who turned the catwalk into a stage, who chose her well-being over the machine, and who returned years later to prove that real presence doesn't fade just because the world stops looking. This is the truth behind the silence. The McQueen moment didn't come from nowhere. It came from a lifetime of training her body to respond to stimuli without thinking, to find grace in chaos, to trust movement over planning. Alexander McQueen's Spring-Summer 1999 show, number 13, was designed to end with a finale that blurred fashion into performance. In a London warehouse space, a rotating platform was set at the center of the runway, flanked by two industrial robotic arms, machines associated with car manufacturing, repurposed here as part of the theater. The point wasn't a model hitting marks, it was finding someone who could stand inside an unknown situation and make it readable from across the room. He didn't need posing, he needed real-time response. Shalom Harlow was his choice. She flew into London the morning of the show, exhausted from the red-eye, and was given almost no information about what would happen. There was no explanation, she later recalled. There was just a frock. She stepped onto the platform in that white dress, the lights came up, and the robots began their assault. What the audience witnessed was pure improvisation. Shalom twisted and turned as paint splattered across the fabric and her bare skin, her movements shifting from resistance to acceptance to something that looked almost like ecstasy. Her dance background, all those years of training her body to express emotion through motion, took over completely. She wasn't performing a concept, she was living through an experience, letting her animal instincts guide her in real time. When it was over, the room broke open. Applause, shock, that stunned kind of silence that turns into noise only after people realize they're breathing again. Writers didn't treat it like a normal runway ending. It's been cited again and again as one of the moments where fashion fully crossed into performance. Human vulnerability, machinery, and spectacle colliding in real time. Decades later, when Coperni spray-painted a dress onto Bella Hadid in Paris, the comparison was immediate. But the McQueen finale wasn't an anomaly in Shalom's career. It was the culmination of everything she'd built, a reputation as the model who could transform any runway into a theatrical event. Understanding how she developed that ability requires going back to the beginning, to a childhood that taught her to reject rigidity and embrace freedom. Shalom Harlow was born on December 5, 1973 in Oshawa, Ontario, a small city east of Toronto. But she didn't grow up in anything resembling suburban normalcy. Her parents raised her in what she later described as a hippie community just outside the city, an environment that valued free thinking, creativity, and unconventional paths. From an early age, Shalom studied dance. She started with ballet, the traditional foundation for any serious dancer, but something about it didn't fit. The rigid positions, the strict discipline, the emphasis on perfect form over personal expression, none of it aligned with who she was. "My rebellious nature always comes out," she admitted years later, reflecting on why ballet felt so stifling. So she switched to tap. The choice revealed something essential about her character. Tap dancing rewards improvisation. It celebrates noise. It lets the dancer's personality emerge through rhythm and sound rather than silent, controlled precision. Shalom was drawn to the freedom of it, the way she could make her own music with her feet, the satisfaction of creating something spontaneous and loud. This wasn't just a childhood hobby. The years of dance training would become what industry observers later called her secret weapon, the foundation for everything that made her distinctive on the runway. While other models learned to walk, Shalom had learned to move. Her body understood rhythm, weight transfer, emotional expression through physicality. She could communicate with a gesture in ways that couldn't be taught in a modeling class. But modeling wasn't on her mind as a teenager. She was interested in art, in dance, in creative expression. The fashion industry existed somewhere far away, irrelevant to her life in that hippie community outside Toronto. The pivot came when she was 16, in a crowd at a Cure concert in Toronto. A scout approached and asked if she modeled. She basically laughed it off. She said she thought the whole idea was ludicrous. But the question stuck. Not long after, she tested the waters through local fashion shows, and the industry began doing what it always does when it finds something rare. It moved fast. When Shalom Harlow arrived in New York City in the early 1990s, she entered an industry dominated by a very specific type of woman. The reigning supermodels, Cindy Crawford, Claudia Schiffer, Linda Evangelista, Naomi Campbell, were voluptuous, confident, overtly glamorous. They projected Amazonian sex appeal and polished perfection. Shalom herself would later describe them as super goddess glamazons. She looked nothing like them. Standing 5 feet 11 inches tall, she was willowy rather than curvaceous, her frame angular where theirs was hourglass. Her features had an ethereal quality, translucent blue eyes, sculpted cheekbones, an almost otherworldly delicacy. Fashion journalists reached for unusual descriptors, pre-Raphaelite, mysterious, introspective. She photographed like something from another era, or perhaps another dimension entirely. The industry noticed. Instead of forcing her into the existing mold, insiders clocked that she represented something new. Alongside her close friend Amber Valletta, who would become her roommate, along with fellow model Carolyn Murphy, she was tagged with a label that captured the shift: anti-supermodels, a shorthand for how sharply their look diverged from the dominant template. But the label never told the full story. Shalom wasn't resisting fame or success. She was widening the definition of what could be compelling. She offered a different kind of beauty, cooler, stranger, more internal, and the fashion world didn't punish that difference. It leaned in. Her rise happened fast, and it didn't depend on the usual kind of polish. She became a staple of the era's biggest magazines and shows by bringing something the camera couldn't get from anyone else. In later interviews, she talked about being positioned as an antidote to the old guard's super gloss glamour, and the irony was that the contrast didn't limit her reach. It amplified it, turning her into a story people couldn't stop watching. It also landed at the exact moment fashion started rewarding a different kind of magnetism. The camera didn't always want bombshell certainty anymore. It wanted mood, tension, interior life. Shalom's stillness could read as intensity, and her movement could read as narrative. In photos, she didn't just sell clothes, she suggested a world. The mainstream saw it too. She won major industry recognition in the mid-90s and became a familiar face beyond the runway, including co-hosting MTV's fashion programming during that era. What ultimately made her unforgettable went deeper than visibility. It lived in the way she moved. Most models walk. Shalom performed. That line sounds simple, but it points to something deeper about how she approached the work. A runway appearance can last less than a minute, the time it takes to step out, reach the end, turn, and disappear again. In that brief window, many models focus on posture, pace, and delivering the clothes cleanly. Shalom treated the same window like a scene. She went beyond showing the clothes and built a feeling the audience could read instantly. Her dance background gave her tools other models didn't have. She understood weight transfer and rhythm. She knew how to make a pause land, how to turn a small gesture into a beat, how to let tension build and then release it at the right moment. Where others saw a walkway, she saw a stage. Where others wore clothes, she animated them. Even stillness, with her, carried intent. Designers noticed that difference and started bringing her into shows where the idea mattered as much as the look. They didn't just need someone reliable, they needed someone responsive, someone who could hold a concept without being handheld through it. The McQueen finale is the most famous example, but it was part of a larger reputation, the model who could take a runway and make it feel like performance. She wasn't only trusted with McQueen's theatrics. In Yohji Yamamoto's spring 1999 show in Paris, the runway played like a wedding story with a strange, practical edge. Brides carrying the little things you actually need. Ceremony tipped slightly into reality. Shalom closed in a strapless black wedding look, built in layers, then undid it piece by piece, shedding dress after dress until the idea came into focus. Construction, pressure, transformation. It required timing, composure, and a kind of control that doesn't read as control. With the wrong person, it would have looked fussy. With her, it looked intentional. Years later, in 2007, she appeared in another high-concept production, John Galliano for Christian Dior Haute Couture. The set played like a dream version of Paris, and she arrived in a translucent, sculptural look built from sheer tulle, styled to evoke lingerie without feeling casual about it. Rather than walking in the standard straight line, she moved with a playful urgency, almost running through the space like she belonged to the world Galliano had staged. The point wasn't provocation for its own sake, it was energy, risk, humor, momentum. The moment only works if the model commits fully, and she did. "I really gave so much of myself to it," she has said about that era of her career. She's described letting her animal nature guide her movements, trusting instinct over perfection, and allowing the body to decide what the moment needed. That willingness to take risks, to be fully present rather than simply polished, made her a favorite for designers who wanted something more alive than a standard runway presentation. She also tested other creative lanes beyond modeling. Across the late 90s and early 2000s, she took acting roles, studio comedies, smaller films, supporting parts that kept her adjacent to pop culture even when she wasn't on a runway. She picked up instruments, including guitar and later drums, trying on other forms of expression. None of it replaced modeling as her main medium, but it reinforced the same trait. She wasn't interested in being only one thing. By the mid-2000s, she seemed to have what the industry sells as the full package: critical respect, commercial success, artistic credibility, and enough earnings to make stepping back possible. She was still being counted among the higher-paid models of that period, even as her public presence became less constant. But beneath the work, something was wrong. Her body, the instrument she'd trained since childhood and relied on for everything, had been sending distress signals for years. And for a long time, she did what performers often do. She kept going anyway. The early warning signs didn't arrive as one clear event. They showed up in fragments: fatigue, strange crashes, symptoms that came and went, the kind of problems that don't form a neat story while you're still trying to live a normal life. Over time, she has indicated she was dealing with health issues long before the public had any reason to notice. She didn't make her body a headline. In an industry built on reliability, you learn quickly what stays quiet and what gets you quietly replaced. So she kept working, she kept showing up. She treated discomfort like something you could outlast because that's what the job trains you to believe, that you can push through anything as long as you keep moving. As the years turned, she began to pull back from the constant churn. There was no announcement and no dramatic exit, just fewer appearances, more space between projects, a slower rhythm that suggested someone trying to protect herself without explaining it. From the outside, it could read like taste, like selectivity, like a model choosing a lighter schedule after years at the top. Inside the body, it can mean something else. Sometimes selective is a survival tactic. Sometimes it's a way to keep functioning in public while privately holding yourself together. Retreat can start as strategy, and then the body decides the strategy isn't enough. It wasn't enough. In 2013, just before her 40th birthday, she has said everything collapsed at once. She was living in Big Sur, a stretch of coastline that people romanticize for its beauty and isolation. In her telling, the environment around her became part of the problem, something she later connected to feeling worse, not better, when she should have been recovering. She has spoken about dealing with Lyme disease alongside serious mold exposure, describing the overlap as a double hit that overwhelmed her system and changed what daily life even looked like. However it began, the arc she describes is familiar to anyone who has watched chronic illness escalate. The body stops cooperating and the mind starts reacting to that loss of control. It's what happens when you've been stretched past the point where willpower can cover the gaps. The woman who had made a career out of physical intelligence, out of translating instinct into movement, found herself trapped inside a body that wouldn't move the way it used to. She has described being bedridden. She has also described the psychological aftermath, trauma, fear, and the kind of nervous system shock that can linger even after the immediate emergency passes. Deep chronic illness doesn't just hurt, it rewrites your relationship with time. Days expand, plans become fragile, identity gets reduced to what you can manage in the next hour and the hour after that. The world narrows to essentials, and even those essentials can feel out of reach. For someone whose entire life had been built on expression through motion, that loss was brutal. The skill that once saved her, pushing through, couldn't carry her here. And that's the moment where the story stops being about career decisions and becomes about survival. After that, the priorities collapsed into something simpler: function. Work fell away. Time stopped being measured in seasons, and the only goal was getting through the day without losing more ground. For a long stretch, Shalom Harlow stopped showing up in the way the public recognized. No magazine cycle, no packaged explanation explaining what was happening, just absence, sustained, unmistakable, and easy for the world to misread. She has described that hiatus plainly. Not a choice, but something her health imposed. The machine can ask for more. The body eventually refuses, and when it does, negotiation is over. So she pulled back, not toward reinvention, but toward recovery. Away from the fashion calendar, away from the pressure of being on, into a life where getting well was the only metric that mattered. When you're used to being seen, privacy can feel like losing oxygen, but it can also be the first real relief. Without fittings and call times, her days could be structured around basics: rest, quiet, patience, the slow work of rebuilding. Not glamorous, not marketable, just the unromantic discipline of healing. The specifics stayed private. She didn't turn treatment into content or recovery into branding. She kept the details close, and that privacy made sense, because there's a particular kind of vulnerability that comes with being publicly admired and privately struggling. Meanwhile, fashion moved forward. The industry didn't pause for anyone. Social media reshaped what visibility even meant. A new generation rose with new rules, new platforms, new definitions of relevance. The spotlight got brighter and more constant. But her world wasn't built around feeds and headlines. It was built around rebuilding, strength, stamina, trust in her own body again. Around learning how to live when performance is no longer possible and when no one can guarantee you'll ever get it back. Those years carried darkness, frustration, fear, the strange grief of watching your former life continue without you, but she has also hinted at something else inside that silence. Moments of learning, moments of grace, the hard-won clarity that can arrive when the noise finally stops. And in that quiet, the questions change. Not, what's next for my career? But, who am I without it? Not, how do I stay seen? But, what does it feel like to be okay? Her name comes from Hebrew. It means peace. For most of her career, that meaning was an interesting footnote, something people mentioned in interviews, a soft contrast to the chaos of fashion. But during those years of illness and isolation, it became something heavier. Peace stopped being a concept and became a requirement. Peace with a body that had become unpredictable. Peace with an identity that no longer came with constant visibility. Peace with the possibility that she might never return to the thing that once defined her. The healing happened slowly and privately, far outside the fashion conversation. No announcements, no countdown energy, no public checklist, just the slow work of getting better, one day at a time, until better started to feel real. Eventually, she reached a point where health wasn't just survival. It was strength, It was endurance. It was the return of a kind of inner steadiness she could trust, and that left her with a choice: stay in the calm she fought to build, or step back into the spotlight and test whether presence still had power after years of absence. She chose to return, but she did it differently, on her terms, with her body no longer treated like an endless resource, with peace not as a footnote but as the point. September 2018, Milan Fashion Week, Versace Spring-Summer 2019. Shalom Harlow was about to step back onto a runway after years away. Versace didn't bring her back quietly or as a nostalgic cameo tucked into the middle of the lineup. She was given the closing walk, the final model to appear, the position that usually signals a muse, a legend, or someone the room is meant to remember. The moment arrived. Shalom emerged in a sheer black gown with floral detailing, dark, slinky, and sharp, and her hair was blown out into wild, untamed curls. Big, unapologetic, and unmistakably her. In an era when the runway had started to favor sleeker sameness, the look read like a deliberate refusal to shrink. She walked with the same command she'd always had. Editors, celebrities, and insiders who had watched her in the 1990s recognized it immediately, that rare combination of control and abandon, elegance with a pulse. When she hit the end of the runway and held her final pose, it didn't register as polite applause. It landed louder, visceral, and immediate, the kind of response that breaks out when a room realizes the return is real. But Shalom didn't narrate it like a victory lap. She didn't talk like someone reclaiming a throne. Her framing was personal, almost quiet in its gratitude. Less about fashion, more about what it meant to be healthy enough to do it at all. The fact that I made it through and was able to regain my health and strength is quite a substantial accomplishment, she said. She described the physical demands of the job with unusual honesty, how being on set can feel like a 12-hour night in a club, how you're sprinting through a marathon. For her to perform at that level again in her mid-40s after everything she'd endured wasn't just a return. "It's really a celebration for me," she said. The industry met her where she was. Stephen Meisel, one of the key photographers of her 1990s era, shot her for Versace's Spring 2019 campaign, and the images made it clear she hadn't lost the thing that made her singular. In December 2018, she appeared on the cover of Vogue Italia, her first cover in years, another signal that this wasn't a one-night cameo. It was a reopening. She also stepped into the platform that had reshaped fashion while she was gone. Instagram became part of her public presence, and she leaned into the history with a wink, sharing throwbacks, including that McQueen spray paint moment, while new fans discovered her through the very clips that were now traveling faster than magazines ever could. She talked about the rush of that online response, the affection coming from people who remembered her and people who were meeting her for the first time. After that, she kept her re-entry selective, showing up when it meant something. In 2022, she appeared in a Mugler fashion film under Casey Cadwallader's direction, reuniting with Amber Valletta in an avant-garde scene that reminded people how much electricity those two could still generate. And in May 2023, she returned to American Vogue's cover in a Supermodel ensemble tribute to Karl Lagerfeld, standing alongside names from multiple generations. Age and nostalgia weren't the headline. What mattered was that she still belonged in the frame, and she didn't need constant visibility to make the case. Shalom Harlow has spoken about what felt different when she came back. Technology is everywhere now. Every runway moment is captured from 10 angles and uploaded before the clothes are even off the models' bodies. She said the after-parties feel different too. Less like people actually letting go, more like people performing for their cameras instead of dancing together. But she didn't come back to chase the past. The version of Shalom on the other side of illness feels grounded, grateful for work but not ruled by it, and willing to choose what matters instead of saying yes to everything. Her story matters beyond fashion because it's about a rare kind of talent and a rarer kind of boundary. She rose by being different, by bringing a dancer's instincts and a rebellious streak into an industry that rewards repetition. She didn't succeed by flattening herself into the expected shape. She succeeded by trusting that her particular gifts, Movement, presence, instinct would make space. And when her body demanded she stop, she stopped. Not elegantly, not on schedule, but because she had no alternative. In that forced pause, she found something relentless success can't offer, a life that wasn't built on being watched. She returned by choice, with nothing to prove, and she did it in a way that kept the power in her hands. At her peak, she could turn a runway moment into something unforgettable. After her return, she demonstrated something even harder, that stepping away doesn't erase your power. Sometimes it's the only way to get it back. Presence doesn't require constant visibility. It requires being whole.